I met you for the first time when you were 5. The summer you left the back of your family's beat-up minivan, dark eyes full of curiosity and sandy hair sticking up in every direction, was the first summer I felt alive again. At first I was afraid of change, someone new in the old farmhouse again. I threw pebbles at you from behind trees and made tree branches shudder menacingly in an attempt to scare you. But still, unperturbed, you played in the mud by the river and swam in its slow-moving water. You swam like a fish, your mother said. I think you reminded me more of a swan. So slowly I grew to like you, and I found myself looking forward to your daily visits. Of course, not every experience by the river was a happy one. I remember when you broke your leg that very winter, slipping hard on the ice and falling with a sickening crack. Every part of me wanted to help you, to scoop you up and carry you back to the old farmhouse on the hill. But even then, I knew that I could not interfere. I couldn't overstep that boundary I'd set for myself. You screamed for hours before your mother found you, and I could only watch. For a while, I wasn't sure you'd be back. Then spring came stumbling around and you did the same, fresh out of your cast and still unsteady when you walked. I never thought I'd be so relieved to see you down by the river, collecting stones. You found something that interested you that day. To you, it was an odd-shaped piece of rock, but to me it was much more. That was the first time you found one of my bones. When summer came again, marking a year of your life with me, I found that you spent hours by the river staring into the water. You seemed distressed, and so was I. I watched you, and my heart ached with sadness. Then, when fall came, I stopped seeing you for a while, almost a month. When you came back, something was different. Your curly hair had been cropped into oblivion. You wore the starched uniform of a school, and your right eye was black. Now I found myself alone as you spent more time at the farmhouse and school. Sometimes I could tell that you'd picked up my finger bone, and I smiled, knowing that you were safe. One day in late winter, as the last snow fell, you trotted down to the bank with a pair of skates in hand. You drew figure eights across the ice and felt the cold sap the warmth from your bones. Little did you know that you were bringing that warmth back into mine. It was March when it happened, when you came down to the river with another boy. I thought you'd found a friend worth bringing to your special place, a confidant you could trust. I was right, in a way. Only he wasn't your friend. He was more than that. I knew when you kissed by the old sycamore log, how your eyes were brighter than they'd ever been, and how your smile stretched wider than it had in months. My heart soared. Things always soar before they drop. When your father found out that you'd kissed him, when he found out that you weren't who he thought you were, he beat you. You ran to the riverside, snarling and hitting things with your fists. Your nose was full of blood, and it dripped into the fallen leaves. You were a boy who loved another boy, and that was something they couldn't understand. When you came to the river that warm summer morning, I knew it wasn't out of happiness. You radiated fear, sadness, despair. You stood by the river, hands shaking, your thoughts a mess, and for the first time ever, I touched you. It was a light touch, on your shoulder, but you whirled around to see me, only to stare through me. You and me were alike. People saw through us. 6 years later found you dipping your toes in the river and skipping rocks across its rolling surface. You'd grown so much since that touch, learning to love yourself and do what you needed to do to stay alive, even if it meant being someone you weren't. You'd found many of my bones now, and, to your credit, kept them all even when you didn't know what they were. But that day, when you picked up a shattered fragment of my shin, you knew it wasn't just another stone. You stared at it for a long time, and then you left. The shovel was heavy in your hands. You marveled at the place you'd grown up, where you'd laughed and cried, lived and loved. Then you tore it up. You ripped apart half of the riverbank before you found my bones. Well, most of them. In the shallow grave where I'd been dumped nearly a century ago, when I'd been killed for loving someone I shouldn't have loved. Just as you were ostracized for it, hurt for it, so was I. Somehow, when you found my bones and took them out with utmost care, I knew my time with you was over, and I was happy as I was devastated. I left, but I never forgot you. Every few years I check in on you. You're older now, in your 50s. You're married to the same boy you kissed by the river, and your eyes still light up every time he speaks. You have your own children, 2 girls and a boy, all with your loving soul and charming wit. Every year I spend less and less time with you, and I was sure that your memories of me were dimming. But today I heard you tell my story to your children, how you always knew I was there, how I never stopped watching over you, and finally, how you knew where to dig to put me to rest. That night, I went back to the river. I sat on the old sycamore log, ran my fingers through the rolling water, and drew figure eights in the mud. I knew it was my last time here, until someday, when you're old and tired, surrounded by those you love and ready to leave your world behind, you'll join me again. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find ourselves back at the river, where my death and your life were so beautifully intertwined.